Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you find yourself in the world. Hello, it's ADSR, it's Paul Nolan once again. Like I said in the chat just before we started, you guys must be sick of the sight of me by now. I keep getting invited back. I feel like Al Pacino in The Godfather. You know, every time I try and leave, I get pulled back in. The only difference is I want to be here because we get to do fun stuff like this. Welcome to the latest stream, and we are going to be looking at XO and RC-20 retro colour tonight from the amazing XLN audio. If you don't know who I am, if you're actually seeing me for the first time, despite what I've just said, my name's Paul Nolan. I'm a music producer, a mentor of artists, and I run a community called MYT, where we nurture the next generation of talent. And what's great about this is everyone's friends here. We're friends with XLN Audio and the guys who make XO and RC-20, and so are ADSR. And the best thing about it is basically ADSR have teamed up with XLN, and their products are on sale at the moment until Thursday the 16th of March for 40% off. That includes a couple of the plugins we're looking at tonight, XO and RC-20, and all of their other product line, including addictive keys, addictive drums, and if you actually own some of these products already, expansion packs are also on sale as well. So all the information that you need is going to be in the video description below and in the chat that is rolling. I can see it in the corner of my eye that it's rolling already and it's off to a good start. And basically you can get all that information, and I would highly recommend it because these products have become a real mainstay of what I do in the studio, particularly RC-20 in recent times. Again, it's a very, very well-known plugin with almost endless potential. So, without much further ado, we'll jump straight into it. We are also going to be in a Q&A towards the end as well. So if you've got any questions, if you want me to cover anything in particular, can do, no problem at all. Absolutely fine, and we'll answer questions at the end. I'm keeping an eye on the chat the whole way through. Lovely stuff. So again, I'm a melodic techno and progressive house producer, so that's my home kind of tip basically. And what I've got here is a bit of a loop I was working on a couple of hours ago, and I'm using XO for the drums, I'm using Diva and Pigments and Serum for all the synth work, and at the moment this does not have any RC-20 on it at all. So we're going to go through some workflow stuff in XO, and then we're going to get really into the whole idea of RC-20 as well. So I want you to hear this without any processing on, shall we say, from any of our lovely RC-20, and we'll get going. So I was making a bit of a banger earlier on today, and then this afternoon I decided to make something like this, a bit more drifty, a bit more atmospheric. And as I say, it's just the 4 channels at the moment, although there's a lot of work going on, shall we say, behind the scenes. And we'll dive into the drums straight away now with XO. So XO, one of my absolute favourites, and I've basically dropped in the lovely preset here that I've got, that I've built myself before. And again, what's great is that you can build it off existing patterns. So let's say, for example, if I go to the whole preset browser here, we could call it, I've got my favorites, and they've got some of my favorite drum sounds in there, both from the internal library, shall we say, within the XO plugin, because it does come with quite a few sounds, and also as well, a lot of stuff from my own personal sample library. I'm on a brand new machine here. I'm on a Mac Mini that I've just upgraded to in the studio from my trusty old iMac. So I'm in the process of adding all these to the sample library and having a great time with it. So this little pattern came out a little bit earlier on today, 123, all very nice indeed. And then from there, I have obviously been able to go through everything in the space here. And I've got a little search on here. If I were to just move everything, a little control and drag there. And I was looking for a clap earlier, which I was quite happy with. And as you can see here, the whole thing lights up if I bring everything up here, and effectively this is an exploded view of your entire sample library. So again, it's made actually searching for sounds not only a lot easier, it's a lot more fun. So let's say, for example, if I'm looking for a particular style of kick, let's say the one that I've got here, kick 1, which I really like, what it will do is that it uses, like, shall we say, some like intelligent algorithms bordering on artificial intelligence, I should say, and it will bring back samples that sound similar from the rest of the library. So it makes finding great sounds a breeze, and I've known from my time of using XO over the last, I think, year or so, since I integrated it massively into my workflow, I've found sounds that I didn't even know I had. And it just breaks you out of that monotony of reaching for the same samples, the same presets, maybe the same old drum racks, the same old machine kits, that kind of thing. Absolutely love it. So again, I've built this little loop here. And if we just isolate the drums, just nice flowy drums. And one of the things I really like here is the fact that you've got A and B parts on the sequencer. So you can have the A section of the sequencer run as it is here on, say, for example, 3 turnarounds or 3 repetitions. And then on the 4th, it will move to the B, which means at the end of a phrase, you actually get, at the end of a 4-bar phrase, you get the ability to add in little rolls, fills, little variations. That'll just keep things nice and fresh. So from here, I've done obviously a lot of pitching of sounds as well. Again, you've got this like sort of pitching element here. One thing I might actually do is see whether or not I can make this a little bit bigger, because it's seemingly not taking up enough of the screen. There you go. That helps me in my old man's sight. So basically, I've done a lot of pitching as well. And again, if you're new to drum programming, it's a great power tip of, you know, being able to actually pitch your samples. It might be the right sample that you're picking, but it doesn't feel like it quite fits. A lot of the time, it can be down to pitching. So again, changing the pitch couldn't be easier. You can drag left and right, and you get a 2 semitone reduction here. Again, really easy to produce little cuts that you need as well with a filter. So you've got a high pass and a low pass filter, which is absolutely brilliant. So I'm always doing that in EQ8 and in other sounds. So to do it on board of this amazing plugin is really, really useful. And again, I can do all sorts of stuff here. You can see here on the envelope as well that I've got some different envelopes coming on board here for various different sounds. You know, I've closed down the ADSR here. So you actually have, you know, a transient, a hold, and a decay. So, you know, we can listen to those sounds individually if necessary. And then the whole thing has a little bit of swing attached to it, which is really nice. So again, especially in things like, say, for example, the closed hat here, if I just... and then add in the open hat over the top, slight different tonality. And instead of, like, say, for example, trying to like splice audio samples together, or, you know, really mess about with the MIDI piano roll, for example, I'm having a great time actually making shaker loops essentially on 16ths using the little sequencer here. And it's really, really cool because one of the things you can do is you can actually click and drag, and it'll give you a higher or, you know, lower velocity essentially. So on the actual kicks itself, on the ones, I should say, you can have a much lower velocity. It always mimics like a side chain essentially. I'm always like side chain and shaker loops and stuff like that. And now because I can detail, just really finesse things in a very easy way, it just allows me to, you know, get a little bit more granular and be able to actually mimic, as I say, and not really need to sidechain anything at all. So again, little things like this can't be underestimated, and it's a real time saver. And if I wanted to really sit there and get really like geeky and really nerdy about it, I could give every single one of these hits, both in the A section and in the B section, which you can see is cloned as well. So you can clone your different sections if you don't actually want to, you know, have any difference between A and B. You can basically give every single one of these a completely individualized sound and velocity essentially. So really, really cool, super powerful. And again, one of the things I really love is being able to explore my sound library. And again, just to bring up the search here, it's just really powerful to be able to look at things in a color-coded way. You know, red being kicks, closed hats, toms purple, percussion in orange, again dotted all over our kind of world view here, shall we say. Effects, again, in that sort of turquoise sound, but maybe you want to go even more granular. Let's say, for example, if we're, you know, looking for a tom, and let's say, for example, I'm looking for a low tom, I can take the main frequency sliders here and make the main frequency for the search to be between 20 hertz or under 40 hertz and up to, say, 180. So what this does is pretty much guarantee that I'm going to be looking at low toms. I can also change the length. So maybe I want a short low tom. Now you can see it's just absolutely reduced my settings down, or my available choices down, to the minimum ones that are relevant to me. Another one that's quite nice is drumminess. So effectively, you get, like, say, for example, if you want to have a high drumminess, shall we say, what that means is it looks at the files on your hard drive and it basically says, like, this one is more percussive because it's got more pronounced attack, essentially. So you do get things like one-shots in here. This is fantastic for one-shot sample discovery, essentially. So you can have things in there like synth shots, bass shots, single note stuff that works really, really well. And again, sometimes they're not as drummy, shall we say, as some of the other stuff in the collection. So we can really refine that down. This is something I really, really love. It's just, again, it's made the ability to find samples. I'm not going through folders. I actually can't remember the last time I went through a folder of samples. It's really quite dry and quite boring, as I'm sure you can agree. Then from there, we've done all of our processing. We've gotten our little pattern going. You know, we're happy with everything. And this is where you can take it to the next level. And one of the things I absolutely adore about XO more than anything is the ability to export stuff in a very quick way, in a very interesting way. So what I mean by that is if I hit the share icon here, I've got the ability to get this information out of XO and into my DAW session in a variety of different flavors. So one of the things I can do is I can hit render WAVs. It'll have a little think about it, and it gives you this absolutely incredible abundance of options. Now, I love this because I'm also a big machine user, and I love the ability to be able to create patterns on a machine and then be able to drag and drop audio loops in and then arrange from there once I've had that intuitive live feel playback. And an XO gives you a very, very similar feel here, where you've got all of these different flavors of rendering, essentially. So if you just wanted the whole thing as a WAV, say, for example, you know, I've actually used XO in the past for creating top loops, shall we say, just top loops, and I've got a kick on another channel or elsewhere, and I've augmented what I've done, say, on machine with other sounds from XO. I can take the whole beat as a WAV file, shall we say. And there you go, there's the whole thing, which is quite cool. Then you can take the whole thing as a MIDI file, which I could always drop into here, which gives you, with C1 as a root note, all the individual channels, including obviously all of the different variations in terms of velocity and everything else. So that's quite cool. And then you've got the ability to go on to a more individualized level. So you can actually take the raw individualized samples here as you've found them within that space area on XO, or you can process them. Again, I've done some processing, some leveling, some volume stuff, and I've also obviously done some filtering, repitching, that kind of thing. And I can then take the entire processed kit. And what's really nice about taking the entire processed kit, if I just drag it and drop it in here, you can see they're all individual samples. Now, one of the things I could do here, if I wanted to, you know, get a little bit interesting, is that I could always go to, you know, something like a drum rack. So I could throw a drum rack in here, take the process kit, and then basically get onto C1, And there you go. So there's your, 7 or 8 sounds there ready to be reprogrammed. And again, you could take that MIDI and drop that in there because I've dropped it on the right MIDI note on C1. And effectively, you've now rebuilt incredibly quickly by dragging and dropping exactly what you had in XO within a drum rack in Ableton, which means you can do further processing with Ableton's own plugins. You could add more third-party plugins. You could do the whole 9 yards. You could save that as a drum rack. The whole 9 yards is available to you. This is what I love about this. It just gives me so much flexibility in export, routing, the whole 9 yards. And again, I could take all stems. Now, because I've picked this 4-bar phrase and, created it, I'll take all the stems. Now, one of the things I can do here is drag in, hold command, boom, and now I have and if I just delete that, every single one, and including that beat, which I will take out, I've got every single one of these as an individual sound, which means then I can, just to close off there for a second, I can Command or Control G, depending upon what platform you're on, group them together, create a drum group, assign those tracks there like so. And what I'll do is I'll turn XO off for a second and then just make the point by, there you go. Now I can do whatever I want. I can level, I can add EQ8s, I can add glue compressors, I can add whatever third-party stuff. I've got complete control. It's just wild how good the export options are. I'd go as far as to say it's possibly some of the best export options I've seen on any music production platform. That includes some DAWs, quite frankly. So, hey, if you're a DAW developer and you're watching, you might want to pay attention and get your export options to be just as good as this, because sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired. Anyway, not naming any names. So essentially, you've got this lovely ability to just create grooves and export them however you like. Absolutely fantastic. Really quick at being able to, get some inspiration going. To be honest, I've spent the best part of the last week getting this new setup together. So I've not actually been making a lot of music, and it's been really kind of frustrating. And like last night, kind of looking at putting something together for the first time on the new rig, it kind of was very frustrating, and I was feeling like a bit blocked and it wasn't quite flowing. And then just running through some of the presets in XO and getting some nice grooves going just completely set me free and really got me going. So again, you don't really need to start with a blank screen and feel like you've kind of meticulously got to put stuff together. You can use any of these preset kits as a jumping off point, and of course, replacing those sounds with almost anything. And again, just to go back to XO for a second before we go, really deep into RC-20, one of the things I really love, if we go back into the preset browser, this is one of my favorite things about it. So let's say, for example, I've done this preset, that's absolutely fine, that's all saved. And one of the things I really like is to be able to actually go through all of these different options, essentially. So this can be great for layering different XO kits together. But one of the things that I'm really going to point out here is, like, say, for example, if I play this one, which is really nice. One of the things I can do is, that's kind of like stage one. So what it can do when you load up a kit like this, you've got the same pattern programmed, as you can see up here, but it will give you a different selection of samples based on similarity. So if I just hit play here and go through some of them, so sometimes you find a variation that actually sounds better than the original. So again, very, very clever use of being able to analyze samples and be able to bring back sounds that are similar and be able to, pretty much give you a different look on the same kit, the same pattern. It's very swappable, very chop and change, very, very interesting indeed. So you've got all of those options there in front of you. And again, this is one of my favorite things to do. And you've got this, obviously, this ability to, hit something random as well, which is really nice. Again, just to save you having to go through, lists and lists and lists of stuff. And again, what's really nice here is I've got things at various different tempos if I just sort by that. So, I've got some really interesting options like, Bristol turntables, like a bit of a trip-hop thing, but if I play it at this BPM, it's kind of like breaks, you're on that kind of like, not so much bicep, but you're also like almost like old school, new school breaks, if you know what I mean. Always takes me back to people like Leo and Bushwhacker and Plank Records and Plump DJs from back in the day. Really, really interesting stuff. So again, you're getting different looks and different feels and different genres all mixing into one. Again, that tempo is actually 78 BPM originally, but I'm actually playing it back at 123. And I could totally drop this into XO and then do something really interesting with it, which is really, really cool. So again, really powerful browsing, really powerful sequencer. Again, we're just really scratching the surface. And again, what you'll notice, go into the share for a second, is I actually took like the processed stems, and not only was I taking the processing in the form of the filters and the pitching and everything else, I've got the ability to put soft clip on the master out. I've got the ability to take, something with a bit of crunch. And you've also got a couple of effect sounds here. So again, you've got effect sends 1 and 2, one going to a reverb, another one going to a big hall. I could always change that to something like a delay. The onboard effects are great as well. So you've just got so much power at your fingertips. It's not even funny. So, and again, as I said, I'm just really scratching the surface of this, and it's been a really, really great companion for me over the last year or so, and I would highly recommend it to anyone, as you can hear, because the drums in this little idea have come out great. So with that being said, we could also do with a little bit of our good friend RC-20. And RC-20 is obviously a bit of an infamous plugin, shall we say, in the best possible way. It's become incredibly popular across whatever genre, and it's become almost like a bit of an instant classic. So if you're watching this and you've not picked it up, I'd highly recommend you do. Just purely because it actually is a bit of not just a time saver, but it's a bit of a cost saver as well. Let's say, for example, if I just throw this on some drums here, one of the things I absolutely love about this is it kind of does like several plugins jobs all at once. I would have something like, say for example, isotope vinyl, or something like, I don't know, audio thing. Oh God, what's the other thing? It's like a tape thing, to do things like noise and wobble. I've got a VHS emulator on Reactor that I tend to use a lot. Distortion plugins like Decapitator and, Fab Filter, Saturn 2, that kind of thing. So effectively, you're getting like 6 plugins worth of processing in one, and they're all built to work together. So it's absolutely brilliant. So again, if you're not too familiar with this, what I'm going to do is I could start off with this. This is a little preset that I've built for myself that's just for pads and stuff, but I can completely, change it. And again, what's great here is you can use it in a number of different contexts. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shut everything down apart from the distortion. And what I like to do, I actually really like to use like RC-20 on drum groups. So let's say, for example, I actually really like using things like the air pressure. So again, we can dial through the different elements here and start it from completely, nothing. Mix is going to be at 100%, so we can just decide how much of it gets dialed in. So here we go. Let's have a listen to the whole thing. And again, just adding in like 19-20% just completely lifts a drum bus completely. And again, speaking of drum bus, I would usually use something like drum bus to do all of this, but you've got these really lovely different circuits. So let's go through a few of them, because again, the air does add a nice crispiness into the top end and a bit of shine, shall we say, and a bit of shimmer. Let's have a go at the rest. Again, that tube pair gives us a little bit more of a duller but more kind of, you know, gritty sound, shall we say. And again, you can hear that low end kind of having quite an effect on from the distortion onto the kick in particular. So I can use this focus control to, let's say for example, you know, emit 120 hertz down, so it's affecting the mid-range and the top end mostly. One of the things I really like as well is the flux mode. So say for example, if I can add, say for example, like 30%, like a third of the way, 33%, and it just adds a little bit of randomness. I just make that a bit more extreme. And again, I would never use it on that setting. However, you can hear how things change over time. So not only is it about making things sound more full, more forward, richer, with a greater set of harmonics, it's also about keeping sounds that are going to do a fairly static job through the mix and adding a little bit of tonal and textural variation as well. This works great at low settings for me, so we'll put that there like so and then drop that to about, again, 19-20%. And that works quite nicely. So again, we've got that on the drum bus. So we'll literally go through, you know, each one of these other three sounds now, and we'll really get digging deep into what RC-20 can offer. Because again, it looks very simple from the outset and great because it's very accessible, very easy to use. However, there's such depth in the possibility that it's worth taking a bit more time. So let's say, for example, we can go to this pad that we've got, which is like a really nice kind of super saw type pad. Just using a bit of side chaining here from this duck plugin. And then we'll add a little bit of this in. And you can just hear that whisper. I love this Apollo mode, because it's actually Apollo Lunar Lander, and I kind of liken it to, you know, it almost sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, essentially, like, you know, a mission to Mars or something like that, or Interstellar. And, you know, it's got that real nice wispy kind of tone to it. But you can also use things like, say, for example, I absolutely love things like the VHS machine. That's a real favourite of mine. Like I mentioned before, I've got a few VHS emulators, and I actually used to have a VHS machine with a battered old tape that had an audio in and an audio out. And believe it or not, I used to send things out of Ableton into the VHS and then return it back and then print it. This is far easier than trying to find an old VHS player in a charity shop or in a thrift store, especially one that has an audio in or out. That was quite an effort, and it doesn't take up as much space, thankfully, because it only takes up screen real estate. And plus as well, you've got so many more options here, so it actually sounds a lot better than doing it the old school hardware way for me anyway. So again, you've got the tone control here. If we just focus in on this pad in terms of the noise, I can almost embed it as part of the pad. And this little follow function here just allows me to fluctuate along with the sound itself. So say, for example, if I was to filter this all the way down, you'll notice on the little waveform readout, we get more or less noise depending upon how loud the signal is. So you don't have to worry about offline editing or anything like that. Again, the duck will also give you ducking similar to a sidechain. Flux is really, really useful in this situation. So you get more randomness. Really nice. You always try vinyl as well there as well. Does add a bit of low end, especially with the tone being what it is. Just dial it back a little bit there. And maybe we can add a bit of wobble. Love the wow and flutter here. Absolutely gorgeous. And I'll have slightly different fluctuations pitch-wise for the left and right channel by hitting this stereo button. What I can also do here is just set this to about 50%, and you get a lovely kind of chorus. And again, what's really nice here is that you can actually, you know, get a really lovely, you know, automatable feel. I absolutely love automating RC-20. It gives me so many more creative options than I would have had otherwise. So again, just being able to, let's say, for example, this is like a 16 bar chord progression on a pad here. I could go to envelopes and I could go to this wow and flutter and I could start here. And let's say, for example, I could just manually put a little bit of automation in just to drop that back in. Do something similar here. And then maybe just crash it a little bit more here. There we go. Yeah, like that. And then we just do a little bit of work on curvature, shall we say. And we can play that again. So we get a more intense element as it goes up to the end of an 8-bar phrase, which I absolutely love. We can add some distortion to that. Go for the iron again. Makes it a bit more mid-rangey, quite nice. And adds a bit more flux to that. And one of my real favourites here is the digital. So this is honestly one of the best bit crushers I've ever used. Like legitimately, like I would buy this plugin just for the bit crusher. Honestly. So useful, really creative, so much control, and like eminently automatable as well. Again, put a bit of smoothing on. And just add a little bit of crunch and a little bit of edge there. You can tell I'm on a completely clean install available, and I've got no Max for Live effects. I was looking for an LFO because I was going to put a Max for Live LFO on this digital and just have it undulate. This is how fresh my install is of Mac OS on this new Mac Mini. I still haven't downloaded all the Max for Live stuff. Anyway, the wonders of live broadcasting for you there, kids. So ultimately, you know, I can obviously, you know, I could do a similar element here. You know, I could actually do a similar kind of element. So let's say, for example, I take that and I go across the whole of this clip. So I can do something very similar using Ableton automation. So I could do right click, insert shape, and you get this lovely undulated perfect sine wave, which is quite cool. Let's just go back to where that's meant to be. And again, I can do that proportionately. So I don't actually, if I just shuffle that to the side, I don't go absolutely, you know, crazy with the digital. I don't want it to be, you know, incredibly, shall we say, like, you know, extreme. I just want it to shuffle down a little bit like that. And again, you've got that long undulation. Again, we can just adjust the mix. Add a bit of flux in there. And I really like this as well, the ability to actually put the focus on certain frequencies. And then maybe we'll drop that a little bit. And then what we can do is actually have this cut icon, or this cut button, which means that actually it cuts out the unprocessed frequencies. So what you're actually hearing there in the digital is actually only the frequencies that were being processed by the module itself. Whereas I can have it blended like so. So again, like, let's listen to it in both modes. You might not hear that much of a difference, but it does really help with the processing itself and keeping it clean. So yeah, you get less of that, so it moves more in line with a peak here around about 4 bars. Yeah, so you get that nice little undulation. So you could go in a slightly different direction here. You could go like this, and then from here you could go like this. Super simple. Select the whole thing. Sort of range bound it, shall we say. So we get these lovely little undulations and peaks and troughs, and we get a bit more action, shall we say, as we go through. Really, really clever. These automation shapes in Ableton are very, very, very underrated. So there's a little Ableton tip for you as well. Again, pads need space, and there's a lovely reverb / resonator in here. Super useful for making mono sounds more stereo, because you can actually have a stereo reverb. So push a mono sound into it completely down the middle of the stereo field. It'll help open things up. So that can help with mono compatibility. One of the things that I really focus on as a mix engineer and as a mastering engineer for other artists is the fact that most material needs to exist in clubs. Therefore, you've got to make sure that the mono compatibility is on point, because most club and big PA systems for nightclubs and festivals tend to be mono for various reasons that are too boring to go into today. So again, this helps open out a sound while still giving you mono compatibility, so it'll still sound great on streaming, on Beatport, wherever it is that you're going to have your music. So again, pads need reverb. And we'll just dial back on that bit crusher and keep it nice and shall we say, delicate. Really cool. And again, I'll just roll off and just focus some of the frequencies more onto the mids and the high end. So really cool. Great sounding reverb, gotta say. And then finally, you've got magnetic. So magnetic is great for these kind of like really tight, kind of like wow and flutter moments. Again, wow and flutter is all about recreating inconsistencies, pitch and level wise, from analog hardware like tape machines, for example. And this is like a more extreme version of wobble, shall we say, because you get things like audio dropouts, that kind of thing. I personally really, really love using it for things like these types of sounds and being able to actually get, you know, some really, really interesting modulations that you would struggle to replicate basically on a synth, even though you are using a fantastic synth like Serum. So you'll see what I mean now. You're already getting modulation there from the wear. Almost like a vibrato. Put that to 100%. Lovely. Great for builds and tension. It's pretty ridiculous what you can do on one sound. I mean, we've just used this pad for the majority of that. So we've got all of those options, and it just opens out any sort of sound. And honestly, it really does open out things for things that were previously set. Like, what I mean by that is like audio files that you can't edit, but you can add an element of modulation to preset and pre-recorded audio files. So let's have a little listen to our main sort of thrust. Just a great granular sound in pigments that I've kind of tweaked. And that Apollo sound's working really nicely. So I can put the follow on. Air pressure's great on that. You see how quick and how immediate it is? You're just into it straight away. And say, for example, if you want to try and blend things relative to one another, you've got the magnitude control, which I haven't talked about yet. So the magnitude control, you'd actually be forgiven for thinking that it's a dry wet. And it kind of is, but it's kind of a bit more than that. Rather than it being a standard dry and wet, if you keep an eye on what are affectionately known as the big knobs, hopefully that won't get us taken off YouTube, me saying that, you will see the light, or shall we say the indicator, around the rotary control that shows how much of the processing is being applied. So if I turn this magnitude control down from 100%, you'll see it reduces, but it reduces in a very interesting way in that it maintains the relative difference between all the different modules in relation to one another. So what that allows us to do is get different looks. And the interesting thing here is, especially when you use this in combination with, modulating things like the input gain. So the input gain will obviously change the input characteristics into each module, which means the behavior will change, especially when you talk about modules like distortion, right? Distortion, it will give you obviously more distortion, it will give you more non-linearity, it'll be a heavier handed sound. So what you'll need to do is hold command, and actually what you can see is that there is a relative gain staging going on between the input and output. So that means, say for example, if I decide to put 12 dB into this, it will take 12 dB out of my output, which means that I get all of the advantages of the processing, and then I don't get any of the, nasty bits, like having to throw my headphones off my head because I've just deafened myself, because I've hit play at the wrong moment and I've put too much gain in and I've clipped everything and destroyed everything, including my relationship to my own music. So this is quite a useful thing because, again, it's scaled by magnitude. So it will change these characteristics. So you can change the input gain upwards while changing the magnitude downwards. So we can have a little bit of a go with that now. You'll be able to hear that now. A slightly more gnarly sound. And again, back to nothing. So again, subtle changes there in this kind of setup. However, again, think about automation through the context of an entire record. You've got the ability to change the magnitude amounts, inputs and outputs. You've got that at the tips of your fingers, essentially, which means that you get this lovely again, morphing, expanding, contracting, constantly moving, constant ear candy, because the way human ears work is based on difference, not just whether or not there's a signal there or not. Notice how if you hear a sound consistently for a few seconds, your ears and your brain kind of get together and decide to ignore it because it's not changing. Lots of interesting psychoacoustical reasons for that. However, this is not the forum for that. A conversation for another day, shall we say. So this is really coming together quite nicely. And again, just a little bit of space on here. Again, I'm using an adaptation of the preset that I've already got here, changed into the air. Really like that. Don't really want to wobble it too much, if I'm being completely honest with you. So I'm probably going to drop that down a little. Quite cool. This is that with the pads. Super atmospheric, and you very quickly get used to the sound of RC-20, and that's almost like your minimum accepted standard for a track, so it's kind of hard to not use it, quite frankly. I mean, I know XLN Audio have got products called addictive drums and addictive keys. They should really have called this addictive sound design processing, although I think RC-20 is probably a bit more catchy as a title, so that's why I'm not employed to name products. You heard it here first. So again, the funny thing is now is that our little bass stab that I've made in Diva is now starting to sound like it lacks a little bit, and that's quite a funny thing, because ultimately what's really interesting here is, sounds to me that a few hours ago sounded really fat coming straight out the synth, all of a sudden just start to sound a little bit weak in comparison when you start to process everything together. So let's have a little listen to this. Lovely sort of moogie bass stab. Don't really want any noise on that, but I do want to tube it up a bit. Add a bit of space to the top end. And again, if I want to give it a bit more beef in the low end, what I can do is I can change on the master control here. I can change the low cut mode to what they call like the hard mode, essentially. So it gives you a bit of a bump, which is really interesting. It can give you a little bit more low end. That can also be quite a useful thing to do. Let's say, for example, now we've got everything out of XO and we can get on the individual stage, shall we say. I don't really need to do anything to this kick because I'm already running another instance through the group. So we've got this lovely creature, right, which is doing just that little bit of iron distortion. If I go into the kick, where have I put that other instance? I've put that on the wrong channel. No, I haven't. Or have I? Let's find out. Oh, it's kick 2. I've put it on the wrong one. God, you can't get the staff these days, can you? Honestly, be getting escorted off the premises, even though I'm in my own house. So basically, from here, I can just have nothing, no processing, but this bump. So let's have a little listen to that on its own, just to give a bit more low end and a bit more weight to the kick. See, that tune's about 31 hertz. All of a sudden, it's just lifted. And I can change this tone here to just make things a little more clicky, a little bit more top endy. Reduce that if it's a bit too clicky. There we go. say for example, I do want this bass to maybe, cut through the mix a little bit more. I quite like the crunch mode for that. You can hear that giving it a bit more bite. Heavy's a bit, heavy. That's got a bit more body to it, but does give you a bit more snap. And again, tonally, do tend to lose a bit of bottom end. That's better. Groovy. I mean, I could sit here and listen to that all night, even if I do say so myself. Wouldn't get bored, just modulating that. You'll come back at 10 o'clock, this stream will still be going, and I'll just be sat there making things go up and down because I'm quite sad and that's my life. Anyway, there you go. So, really nice, again, good introduction for RC-20 in this genre. I mean, there's stuff here that I'd say, is probably applicable no matter what genre you're making, basically. Just because I'm happen to make some really drifty, sort of proggy stuff here. Doesn't mean that it's not applicable to whatever genre you're making. So let's have a little look at the comments, shall we? Mr. Andy Woods, my old mate. Hello, sir. Thank you very much. Hello to June 8. Excellent stuff. And amazing stuff, man. Really, really cool. So I'm just going through the chat now, just making sure there's any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat right now. Right, okay, let's have a look. Great television, this, honestly. When will it be natively available with M1 in VST3? I feel like a lot of plugins are behind on this front. I kind of know what you mean. I mean, it's just a process that we've got to go through. That's a good comment from Nicholas Bean there. However, I'm running this on a M2, Pro Mac Mini, and as you can see, it's handling it absolutely superbly. I'm finding that I'm getting incredible performance just from even running stuff in Rosetta, so it's absolutely fine on the Mac front. Simple Sam says the export options are pretty cool. I have a similar plugin, but I don't think I can export stems. Well, you know what to do, especially before Thursday, right? Jacob Parkinson, hello, sir. Abraham Clark, okay, how much? Take my money already. Well, that's what we like to hear. Excellent stuff. Bishop 91, that mix knob on the wobble is my favourite. Yeah, it gives you so much control, doesn't it, mate? It really, really does. Very, very cool. Yeah, Collins O'Dwyer makes a really good point here. He says the Bit Crusher is actually the best. I pretty much only come to this plugin for the Bit Crush, magnetic, and sometimes the wobble, which is a really good one. And he says here as well, the Bit Crusher is also very useful for adding click back to drum samples. So sometimes when you actually process stuff, the nice percussive edge can kind of come off, and sometimes it can be a little bit problematic. Whereas if we actually bring it up on the screen, on the digital, it can actually really help to bring that back in, which is absolutely fantastic. Really, really cool. Bishop, I know what I'm doing after this stream. I don't automate enough. There you go, mate. Absolutely. Lovely, lovely stuff. Excellent. Andy Woods, some of the effects here would have been so well applied even onto hardware synths, as the workflow seems very easy to follow. It's incredibly simple, and I know Andy, he's a very old friend of mine, and he's got incredible hardware synths like Access, Virus, TI2 Polars. That is so applicable to that incredible synth. So again, I'm using it with samples and some really great plugins. Think about that in the analog realm. If you own things like Eurorack Modular and tools like, say, for example, VCV Rack, which are fantastic in software. Also, as well, stuff like, Softtube Modular, if you're into that kind of mode, or if you have any form of hardware, just works fantastically on anything. Really, really does. Excellent stuff. June 8th, yes. Automation for dinner tonight. Well, I already ate before the stream, so it's a bit late for me. So, got to watch me waste as a middle-aged man, shall we say. Abraham, how would we start from scratch in EXO, workflow-wise? The best thing to do is just play with it, because it really is, it's incredibly simple to get something going within the context of EXO, because you've got all these preset patterns. So think about it in, shall we say, a more modular fashion, where you have patterns and you have samples, and you can get different samples to match those patterns. So what I find is, what I used to do when I was working outside of something like EXO, for example, I would be doing the same thing over and over again. I'd be putting kicks in on each beat, and I'd be sat there. And it's like, I don't want to think about the hours of my life I'm never going to get back, because I've just been sequencing kick drums and 16th note shakers. Whereas a lot of that is already done for you in a way. So you can then just assign the right sound that gets the right feel to the right pattern, and the whole thing is interchangeable. So the best thing to do, it was very similar actually to when I first got a machine. I had machine in standalone mode and just didn't even look at a computer screen for maybe a month, and just tried to jam out and really get to understand the workflow. I'd open up EXO in an empty instance of your DAW of choice and just play around with it and just get grooves going and get comfortable with it. I think that's going to be the best thing to do. The other aspect you can do as well, if you've already got musical or melodic ideas, is try and parachute some kits straight over the top. You'd be surprised at what works. You really, really would. There you go. June 8, middle ages, technically in our 30s. I'm 43 at the end of the month, mate. Don't talk to me about your 30s. All good stuff. Thank you to Robert Bialis for tuning in. Amazing stuff. Thank you very much. And again, it's just been another lovely time actually being able to, hang out with you guys. So I think that's going to do it, because you don't seem to have any more questions. Everybody seems quite happy. Once again, you've got 40% off until Thursday. The details are in the chat and in the video description below. All your links, everything you need to get hold of that deal through ADSR. Wonderful working with these guys. I've been having an absolute ball. My name's Paul Nolan. I am from and of MYT, as well as other things. I've worked with people like Sasha and Junkie XL in the past. Got an album of myself coming out next month, which I'm actually in the process of mixing right now. So that's what I'm going to be spending my evening doing. Again, if you like what you see here, and you can stand the sight of me on a regular basis like it has been recently around these parts, feel free to give this video a like. Feel free to do as what these YouTuber kids do and smash that like button, hit the notifications bell, subscribe as well, because again, we've got so much more stuff coming. I'm talking to the guys at ADSR about doing more stuff, so there is more stuff coming. Check the YouTube channel as well. There's loads of stuff happening there. Shorts, smaller videos, smaller tips, some of which I've contributed. There's loads of stuff going on. And of course, again, ADSR being the place where you can get all your sounds, all of your presets, all of your sample packs, great deals on plugins, tutorials. It's just your one-stop shop for anything. And that is why I'm very, very proud to be working with these guys. They are fantastic and they know what they're doing. And they've got excellent taste in music, considering I met them at a Sasha gig. So, they know what they're talking about musically as well. Anyway, I will leave you guys to the rest of your day. Hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Hope you've learned something. Hope you feel inspired. I'm here. Again, find me online. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Instagram. We've got our own YouTube channel, MYT. You'll find it. I'm commenting in the chat. Do whatever you need to do. But more than anything, enjoy yourselves. Stick with ADSR. More amazing stuff coming. Thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will see you guys very, very soon.